Heads or tails? Flour or corn? Brittany or Christina? These are the choices I face every day of my life. While choice is a concept we're all familiar with, it was the advent of video games that allowed us to incorporate choice into art. Yeah, there have been exceptions. R.L. Stine made me choose between eating the purple goop or the chocolate cake in that one book. Black Mirror made Bandersnatch, and that was pretty cool. But no art form can measure up to video games in making choice a core element. Exhibit A, Infamous. Game that turns you from a nobody to an electric storm of a somebody. It's the game that asks you to make the grandest yet simplest of choices. Do you use your newfound power for good and choose the path of a famous hero, or do you become a dick? Hey everyone, so I just totally got a real not made up email from Sony and Sucker Punch regarding Infamous and me recompleting the game for you guys. So I'm gonna read that totally real email for you guys right now. Dear Gerard, we're excited to hear that you're doing another episode on Infamous and we'd like to help. We're sending a creative team to direct your episode and give it that real Infamous PS3 feel. So just do your thing. We'll handle the rest. Love, Sony, and Sucker Punch. Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Sounds interesting enough. Here we go. Hey everyone, and welcome to an all-new episode of the Completionist New Game Plus, the show where I am recompleting the first 120 games I ever featured here on my channel. Infamous is... I gave my usual greeting and proceeded to introduce the game. I talked about the story, then the mechanics, and then made an obligatory comparison to Activision's prototype. On to the next section. Hey Sony? I think we just skipped over a whole lot of important stuff, like we should actually do those things we just talked about, you know, so the audience can experience them and have a chance to care about what we're doing here on the show. More importantly, about your game. Hello? Alright, much better. With the countless superhero games on the scene, Infamous gave us something different. It was grittier than what I was used to, told a great story, and honed in on making you more powerful as the game progresses. You play as Cole McGrath, an ordinary messenger in the fictional Empire City, which is essentially New York. During a delivery, he unwittingly activates the Ray Sphere, an orb of immense power that levels a portion of the city and grants him the ability to absorb and expel electricity. In the aftermath of the explosion, the city gets thrown into chaos as it contends with loss of power, a toxic virus, and the rise of mysterious deadly gangs. As Cole discovers the truth behind the cause of the chaos, he makes a series of good versus bad choices that lead him to being seen as a famous hero or an infamous villain. Infamous plays like a superhuman Grand Theft Auto, but without the theft auto part. It's an open world sandbox that constantly has you looking at your mini-map for the next destination. It's pretty much a third-person shooter in disguise. Guns are replaced by electricity coming out of your hands, collecting ammo is replaced by absorbing power from nearby stuff like rooftop AC units or generators, and you even learn shooter game abilities like sniping or throwing grenades. Collecting shards and completing side missions increases Cole's power and earns him experience, which can be used to purchase new abilities and enhancements, a few of which can help him traverse the expansive world of Empire City more easily. In other words, you get to do cooler stuff as you progress. When Infamous came on the scene in 2009, it was pretty unique. For about a month. For better or for worse, this game will forever be known as one of the two games that came out at the same time and were unquestionably similar. The other game I'm referring to, of course, is Prototype, and the similarities are unmissable. Both play in an open world sandbox. One takes place in a fictionalized version of New York City, with the other taking place in New York City. Both involve a normal guy who suddenly wakes up with powers, has no idea how he got them, and is able to enhance them over the course of the game. Both involve the city falling into chaos from a virus. Both have you gaining access to people's memories to solve a mystery. Both have gross water towers. Both got sequels. The list goes on. These games have often been confused for each other, and it's obvious as to why. They will forever be linked. They will always be compared. As two similar titles that came out at the same time, they are the Prestige and the Illusionist of video games. Many argue which game is better, and I'm gonna go on record and say, screw Prototype. You're just Activision's lazy attempt to redux an older game. You're Spider-Man 2 in a trench coat and Groucho Marx glasses. Look at me, I'm a new game, huh? With great power comes great... Nah, you gotta sack up, forget about it. Infamous at least felt like a new game. I first played it on the PS3 as part of a 4-episode arc for charity. Each episode focused on a game where a bald or buzz-haired protagonist existed, and yes, I shaved my head for the month. InFAMOUS was the last of these 4 episodes, and I remember it kind of whooped my ass out the gate. It also had some tedious qualities, leading me to give it a finish it rating. Now, I completed it again on the PS3 for this most recent playthrough, and found that certain things I enjoyed or found difficult before have shifted. So, let's get into those things and what they were, shall we?
I went into what things were and brought up several great points with evidence to support them all. I then gave InFAMOUS my completionist rating of...
We're not doing it this way, come on. But since it kept trying, you know what? We're gonna talk about how poorly this game's story was presented. The game dumps pivotal plot points through rushed narrated cutscenes so that you never get invested into what's being told. It's unfortunate because the story is pretty sweet, it's just told to us in the wrong way. In the beginning of the game, we're introduced to Cole's girlfriend Trish by means of a telephone call. The player is still in control of Cole as he runs across town, which was an effective way to keep the player engaged while introducing a new character and providing exposition. Cole tells her he just jumped off of a roof, and her concerned reaction shows both a genuine love for Cole and that his powers are still a new thing for everyone. Cole coordinates with Trish to meet him and his best friend Zeke at a place where food supplies have just been dropped, showing that the 3 of them are, amongst the chaos, a tight survival unit. The call ends with a sincere "I love you" between Cole and Trish, and with me starting to care about these characters. All of that is then wiped the hell away when we get the following graphic novel style cutscene. Cole narrates these cutscenes in his unnecessarily gruff voice as he rushes through major plot points. Now, don't get me wrong, I dig this style. Sucker Punch used it very well for the Sly Cooper games, and it provides a nice visual contrast to this game's overwhelmingly gray palette. But it's not the best way to deliver this information we're about to receive. In this cutscene, we see that Trish bails on Cole because she now thinks he's responsible for his sister's death. I get it. The game wants to convey that whether you choose fame or infamy, Cole's path is a lonely one. But Trish continually shows up in the story, and your interactions with her mainly boil down to her telling you to do something, you do it, then she says, "Thanks, I still don't like you." She's even a key motivator for why the main villain, Kessler, caused all this chaos. I should care about her more, but because she was reduced to a byline in an early cutscene and continues to throw misplaced anger at Cole, I don't. It makes sense that she would shift trust away from Cole and leave him after losing her sister. I just want to see more of that shift instead of merely hearing Cole say, "She left." I feel like the story's presentation errors even more with the introduction of Moya, the FBI agent who explains to Cole the origin of the Ray Sphere. She tells him that her husband, John, infiltrated the group who created it and has gone missing. She promises to clear Cole's name and grant him access out of the quarantine zone in exchange for finding her husband. Now, do you know how I learned all this information? Cole told me about it in 30 seconds during a cutscene. If you're thinking I abridged anything, no, I learned all this info as unceremoniously as I just told you all. Suddenly, this stranger is your handler giving you directives and whatnot, and I'm thinking, damn Moya, buy me a dinner first. So when you find out later on she's been keeping a big secret from you, I wasn't bothered. That's fine. I didn't have a lot invested in this character to begin with because of how she was introduced. Maybe it would have been different had I heard Moya tell her story herself, rather than getting the cliff notes from Sergeant Voice McGruff here. Kimberly Colburn sounds like a capable voice actor and can probably bring some strong pathos to the story, but the way it was presented through the cutscene and Cole's narration made me not care. Looking back at my first completion of InFAMOUS, these storytelling concerns weren't as present. Maybe it was because I was distracted by the cool graphic novel style of the cutscenes. Maybe grinding along telephone wires and train tracks gave me all the satisfaction that I needed. But if I had to choose one reason why the story presentation bothered me this time around, I'd say it's because a good story has generally become more important to me over time. And like I said, the plot is good. It's a different take on the superhuman origin story that I was used to. And the reveal of Kessler's true identity and motives was a dope plot twist. I didn't see it coming. I just wish the game had better sense when it came to taking the controller away from me and having me watch. I wish it had better management of what to show, what to tell, and what to have me play. I wish there was a bigger difference in doing the good playthrough versus the bad playthrough. I had to do both in order to get all the trophies, but story-wise, there's not a big difference here. InFAMOUS had all the right tools to get me invested in the story, but didn't use them all that properly. Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for today's video, G Fuel. For those of you guys who don't know, G Fuel is a natural energy drink formula that you mix with water or milk or some kind of liquid. It's honestly up to you and your preferences. Now, it's no surprise that we're sponsored by G Fuel. A lot of your favorite creators are, and we've been working with G Fuel for about a year. And thanks to them and their awesome support, we've been able to not only keep the lights on, but really have some fun with the bits that we come up with in the show. I don't usually like working with companies in these long form ways, but the folks at G Fuel are actual fans of the show. It's important that the companies we work with actually are invested in the things that we create. There are a ton of different flavors you can get from their website, and you guys are probably sick of me saying it, but my favorite actually is the sour phase berry. So if you want to pick up some G Fuel today, head over to gfuel.com, and on checkout, be sure you use code Completionist. Doing so saves you 30% off your order. Again, gfuel.com, code Completionist. Thanks for watching. Now back to the show. So now that we've talked about something I didn't enjoy as much for my first recent completion, let's talk about something I enjoyed more this time around. The game is steady and consistent as it progresses Cole from weakling to badass. Something the developers aimed for was not just having you play as a superhuman, but having you become a superhuman. To that I say, mission accomplished. Starting out, Cole has two abilities that make him super: climbing buildings really well, and hands that go zap zap. You quickly figure out how to Jedi Force push things, and you keep learning new stuff throughout the game until eventually you're creating death rays of destruction that would rival the almighty Zeus. Major abilities are learned during the subterranean missions to restore power to portions of Empire City, while other abilities are purchased with experience through the game menu. However, some abilities are locked behind a karma wall, meaning you can only purchase them once you've become a certain amount of good or a certain amount of evil. This prevents Cole from becoming too powerful too early. This system works because after learning a new ability, the game provides plenty of new opportunities to experiment with and master that ability before introducing you to the next one. After getting the power to snipe enemies, you'll come across more instances where you have to shoot enemies through a narrow opening, or side missions where you have to headshot a group of foes before they attack a civilian. Once you're able to skim across power lines, you get to do fun against time side mission races that have you skimming away. And then there's the thing that gave me the biggest headache on my original completion run: stunts. There are 21 of these mainly combat-oriented stunts that can be performed at any time, granted that Cole has the necessary ability to perform them. Doing a stunt grants you some experience points, and doing all 21 is required for the Stunt Master trophy. While some stunts, like environmental takedown, are bound to unlock naturally, others, like sticking a grenade on an airborne enemy, are far more challenging. Now, I bring up stunts because as much as I bitched about them before, I actually enjoyed them this time around. I was sure to do my research as to what part of the game was best for attempting the more challenging stunts, and it helped wonders. Like, I learned that stunts are best attempted on a good playthrough, since one of the good upgraded attacks makes enemies float for a bit after hitting them with an energy blast. This made stunts like the sticky grenade one way easier. On this recent playthrough, I was actually looking forward to getting a new ability and executing as many stunts as I could with it before moving on. Stunts were a great indicator of how much power I had gained and what I could potentially do with it. The more I progressed through the game, the more they made me realize how much of a badass I was turning into. They became just challenging enough to be fun without being the headache they once were. So with that challenge diminished, what took its place? Honestly, my own patience, namely when it came to collecting blast shards. Empire City is loaded with these things both high and low, and getting all of them is required for the Rockhound trophy. You can get nearby ones to show up with your minimap on, and when you're exploring a new area, there's always one nearby. Since I had to get them all eventually, it was more efficient to collect them as I approached them, which meant I was constantly interrupting the main story and all the other fun stuff to go on these treasure hunts. This bothered me before, and it bothered me again, but not quite as much. Each shard grants some XP, and collecting a bunch of them gives Cole a new battery core. In other words, it's like extending his power meter and allows him to wreak more havoc before needing to recharge. This incentive helped mitigate my impatience by progressively making me feel more powerful. I generally had to make sure I had a power source nearby if I was going to go buck wild, but by the time I was looking for my last few shards, I was dishing out electrical storms with reckless abandon. I really did feel like I was becoming a progressively more powerful superhuman. So we've progressed, we've collected, we've upgraded. What do we get? Well, first let's talk about the two playthroughs, the good and the bad. Doing both playthroughs give you a slightly different story, emphasis on slightly. The main plot points play out the exact same way, with more people alive and liking you in the good version, and more people dead or hating you in the bad version. For those of you that care about knowing both endings, just play through and see one and look up the other. It's not really worth a second playthrough in my opinion. Now, I mentioned the shards and how they increase your power power pool. I appreciate that they can be found on your radar. I appreciate the incentive the game gives you for collecting them more than I did in my first completion process. However, coal maxes out at 24 battery cores, and even that is more than sufficient to go power crazy. There are also shards you can get as reward for certain side missions, so any that you have yet to be found around the city are basically extraneous. They'll grant you a bit of experience that you'll probably no longer need by the time you find them all, so they'll only count towards your completion percentage on your save file. In other words, I would have liked to have stopped searching for the blast shards sooner than I had to. I mentioned how I enjoyed the stunts this time around, and the fact that you get a little XP and 3 trophies for working on them was just a reward. Completing all side missions was fairly painless and was likewise rewarding. Aside from the XP from completing each one, enemies no longer appear in the borough you completed them in, making traversing through the city much easier. Completing all side missions in a district grants a trophy, so with 3 districts, that's 3 nice trophies for your efforts. Again, pretty much just rewards. And then there's the dead drops. Now, these are collectibles found on rooftops and are easily found thanks to the minimap. Like the side missions, you can get some experience for each dead drop recovered and a trophy for finding all of them in a district. But you also get a little more. Each dead drop features a voice recording of John discussing his infiltration of the First Sons. Some also have audio of the villains you encounter, including the main baddie Kessler. For me, these recordings are the best completion reward in the game. They provide so much detail to the story and, in a sad way, are more compelling than many parts of the main story itself. We get further clues into the First Sons, how they originated and who the current operators are, and even a hint at Moya's betrayal. If you're going to play Infamous, I definitely recommend taking the time to find all these dead drops. In my journey recompleting Infamous, there were 38 hours of total playtime, much faster than the first time thanks to researching the stunts in advance. 55 deaths, mainly from going in fist flying only to remembering that this game is more of a shooter. And most of them were also on hard mode. 350 blast shards collected around Empire City, not including the ones I earned through the side missions. 21 stunts performed and enjoyed much more on this completion run. 32 dead drops found, providing the best part of the story. 69 neutral side missions completed. 15 more that can be good or bad. 2 complete playthroughs, one being on hard mode for good and one being on normal for bad. So take all the numbers I just said, the blast shards, the stunts, the dead drops, and the missions, and double them. 50 trophies earned once again, and 2 DLC Gigawatt Blades I was afraid to use because I would often die after trying them out, simply because of the fact that they require you to be up close and personal, and that's not what this game is. Revisiting Infamous brought back some fond memories of shaving my head and kicking ass. After completing it again... Actually, you know what? Why don't you take over?
Going from a weak electrical socket to a frickin' nuclear power plant of destruction was a lot of fun. I can't believe how poorly the awesome story was delivered. Collecting shards is still tedious. Collecting dead drops was great though. I wonder if my gripes with this game were better handled in the sequel. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. So with all that in mind, I once again give Infamous my completionist rating of Finish It.
Finish it!